Hi guys, it's Miss Ipel and this is my dog Fox, my little helper. And we are going to teach you today about integers and absolute value. Okay, Fox is gonna go play. So let's start with integers. An integer can be one of three things. It can be a positive whole number, and examples of that would be like 4 and 38. A negative whole number, like -7 or -29, or 0. 0 is not considered to be positive or negative. It's a neutral number, but it also is considered an integer. Absolute value is a number's distance from 0 on a number line. So if I'm trying to find a number's absolute value, I imagine that number on the number line. I would count how many spaces it is from that number to 0. So if I'm trying to find the absolute value of -3, it's 1, 2, 3 spots to 0. So its absolute value is 3. All right, so a couple important things about absolute value. Absolute value is denoted by these two long lines surrounding a number. So anytime you see those two long lines around a number, they're asking you for that number's absolute value. So 5's absolute value, or distance from 0, is actually 5. -9's absolute value, or distance from 0, is 9 because it's 9 spaces from 0. Absolute values will always be positive because they represent a distance, and distances are always positive. So you can have a positive or a negative number inside of your absolute value symbols, but the answer will always be positive since it represents a distance. All right, the last thing we're going to do is a couple of example problems here with absolute values. So one thing you could be asked to do is compare some numbers where some of them are being given to you in the absolute value symbol. So in this case, the absolute value of -7 compared to the absolute value of 6. Well, -7 is 7 spots from 0, and +6 is 6 spots from 0. So this one will actually be the greater one. Here we're comparing the absolute value of 8 and -8. Both 8 and -8 are both 8 spots from 0, so they're actually equal. And our last example there, we have one number that's in the absolute value symbol and one that is not. So the absolute value of -2 is 2 compared to 1. -2's absolute value is greater. So that's one thing we can do with our numbers and absolute values, compare them. Sometimes we may also be asked to order absolute values. So in that case, I know that anything that's in an absolute value sign is going to be positive, so I'm looking for the smallest negative to start off my list. So the smallest negative I see here is -6. The next smallest is -2. Now I'm left with three things that are going to have positive values. I've got +6, the absolute value of -4, which is 4, and the absolute value of 3, which is 3. So out of those, the one that would come next in my list is the absolute value of 3, which is worth 3. Then it would be the absolute value of -4, which is worth 4. And my greatest value is 6. All right, let's try this with one more list here. So once again, anything that's in the absolute value signs is going to end up being positive. So I'm looking for the smallest negative when I start my list. That's -19. The next one I have here is -11. Now I'm down to 3 things that are all in the absolute value symbols. So I've got -29, which is worth 29, +25, which is worth 25, and -10, which is worth 10. So of those 3, the next one in my list should be the absolute value of -10, which is worth 10. Then out of my 2 left, be the absolute value of 25, which is worth 25. And finally, my largest, the absolute value of -29. One other thing that you may be asked to do and where you may come across these absolute values are when you're simplifying or solving different problems with absolute values. In this case, we have a negative that's outside of the absolute value symbols. This negative actually means opposite. They want the opposite of the absolute value of negative 2. Well, the absolute value of negative 2 itself is 2. The opposite of that is going to be negative 2. So this will actually have a value of negative 2. In a case like this where we're being asked to add two things that are in absolute values, I would want to solve the absolute values first. The absolute value of 9 is 9. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3. So I'm actually just adding 9 and 3 here for a grand total of